There are moments in life that you'll never forget. Memories you'll pass on to your children, and they'll pass on to theirs. They'll be talked about when friends come together as myth, lore, and legend. These are Tales from the Tailgate. All right, guys, welcome back to the show. If you're familiar with us, then you're going to know today's guest. We've had a laugh or two at his expense, and he's thrown a few at us. So, as always, I'm joined by my good buddy Trev. And Trev, if you do us a favor, please reiterate our wonderful guest.
Yeah, this is our good buddy Damian. If you have heard any podcasts in the past, you've definitely heard Damian, a.k.a. we call him Ken. So, what's up, Damian? How are you, buddy?
What's going on, fellas?
How's everything, man?
Great, man. Season's kicked off here, so been busy trying to get out there and chase whitetails.
Yeah, you've had a busy season right from the start of September, man.
Yeah, I got lucky and drew an elk tag in New Mexico. I drew one in 2019. Then my buddy drew one in 2020, and then we both drew one in 2021. So. Went back out to New Mexico this year and got to chase around some elk.
Dude, that's awesome. So this has been something that you've kind of been setting yourself up to for quite some time now.
Yeah, this is the third. The first time I went to New Mexico was 2012. And then I didn't draw for a couple years. And then I was trying to draw just as a non-resident. And then I got hooked up with Isaiah Gonzalez out of Primetime Outfitters and started applying through the outfitter pool. And 2 of the last 3 years that I've applied with them, I've drawn, and my buddy Dave has drawn all 3 years. So pretty fortunate.
So what was the attraction to New Mexico over any other state that you've hunted before?
I don't know if you want to call it lazy, whatever, but I like the idea of 100% lottery. I don't like the points game, and I just hate that. And New Mexico's 100% lottery. Honestly, when I went there in 2012, I used to film for a hunting television show, and I got to go hunting out there on a private ranch tag in 2012. And got a little taste of it out there. And, after that, I just wanted to go back every year and was applying and failing and applying and failing. And, there's a little bit of a system that you can kind of play to better your odds if you know what you're doing. And, I was going to buy another private ranch tag, and my buddy Kevin that I went out there with in 2012, he's a phenomenal taxidermist and Missouri, and he became really good friends with the outfitter and does all of his taxidermy work for him and everything. And pretty much, I don't know what their deal is, but I'm pretty sure he does it for a ranch tag every year. And he's hunted with him pretty much every year since. And I called him up and I was like, "Hey man, do you think Brian has any ranch tags?" And he's like, "Nah, probably not for this year. He sells out, And he said, and it was right when the lottery was getting ready to be put in. And he's like, "But honestly, if I wasn't loyal to Brian," he's like, "this guy out here, he's a local legend. I would go with him. The guy lives in the mountains. He knows every elk in the mountains. And he's got a reputation for killing the biggest bulls in the units that he goes in for." So I got a hold of him, and he's a younger dude. He's only 31, I think. And he's just a beast, man. He's Isaiah Gonzalez. If you get on him, follow him on Instagram. The guy goes out and shed hunts. He finds enough elk sheds that he started up a dog shoe business, and he sells elk antlers and makes elk furniture. And he shows videos on Instagram where they're coming out of the mountains with 150 pounds of elk antler on their back. It's just crazy. And so I put in with him for that in 2019, and my buddy Dave and I drew, and it was just a phenomenal hunt. He had us in, great elk every day. And we both tagged out on 6x6 bulls. And then the next year we went back when I just went as kind of because I wanted to go. And my buddy Dave shot like a 320 bull the next year. And then this year we went back and we both shot, great 6x6s. I scored him, I'm not a professional elk scorer, but I scored him at just over 320. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but and then Dave's was right there with mine. His was actually a really old bull. He just he wasn't past his prime, but he just he wasn't a mega giant, but we were chasing a mega giant. It was an amazing trip. You talked about elk hunting and success odds are 9-10%. Nationwide, and I'm 100% every time I've gone elk hunting. So
there you go.
It's pretty awesome.
So why don't we get into the meat and potatoes? Honestly, why don't you kind of lay us into the hunt? Like you get into New Mexico and kind of the tolls and the things that you kind of went through. The trials and tribulations. Sure,
man. So we drive from Ohio. It's a 25-hour drive for us. We get there the day before the season opened, and it's funny because Isaiah, out of some bad choice, ended up having his wife pregnant and due right in the middle of our hunt. So I don't know how he did it, but he sweet talked the doctor to inducing labor to the day before our hunt started. So he wasn't there for the first 2 days. And I hunted with Jordan, one of his guides, who's a great hunter. He knew right where to get into the elk. And first morning out, so we got there, we get our camp set up, and went out that night listening for some bugles and heard a few, but it was kind of warm that night, so they weren't real talkative. And next morning, we got up and headed in, and it wasn't long after daylight. We heard some bulls bugling, and we started kind of stalking in. They were talking enough to where we could kind of just head at them, And we got, it took us probably, I don't know, quarter of a mile, half a mile, somewhere like that. And we finally laid eyes on him, and he was a really nice bull, had phenomenal brows, fronts, and his thirds were they were probably 18, 20 inches swept way out, and looked phenomenal. And then he turned sideways and he had weak tops. Like his fifths and his sixths were just they were just little forks, And, Jordan's like, we can kill him. He's heading to that saddle. We can beat him. We can drop off the backside, get the saddle, and he'll come right into us. We don't even have to call. But opening day and the first bull we seen, I was like, I don't think I want that one. I like tops. If I'm going to sacrifice anything, I'm going to sacrifice the fronts, the brows, and maybe some thirds. I love big tops. To me, that's what makes a bull look big. And so we backed out of those elk, and we topped over a ridge and got on to another bull that was bugling. I'm, fairly confident in my stalking ability, and which works out well that the guide doesn't have to be with me. He'll drop back call, I'll stalk in. And on this situation, I stalked in on a small 6x6, maybe a 270 type 6x6 with a couple cows, and had him at about 40 yards. Bugling. I filmed him on my cell phone. I could have shot him pretty easily. He was standing there looking over the hillside, just bugling, looking away. I was like, why couldn't you be a 350?
Right. Of course.
So they ended up topping over the ridge. Never knew we were there. I dropped back to Jordan, and we kind of topped over the hillside. And as we topped over the hillside, we looked up, and just cresting over a hill was a big bull. All you saw was big, heavy beams, and we're like, whoa. And he threw up the binos, and he could see as he was topping over the hill, he's like, that bull had at least 7 on his right side. And I'm like, oh, that's nice. So we circled around. There's a big water hole there. We circled around, made a few calls trying to get him. Never bugled, never made a word. And it was starting to get warm. You know, it's probably 10 o'clock in the morning by this time. And we started kind of heading back out the way we came in, and we heard a bull bugle. And it didn't sound like it had a great bugle, but I like stalking bugles. so we kind of just we started heading his way, and he wasn't bugling a lot, and it was just kind of half-hearted stuff, you know, and it was just enough that he would bugle. I could go 50, 60, 70 yards. He'd bugle again. You'd stand there for a few minutes. He'd bugle again. You could creep forward. And I got up to a position where I felt like I was really close to him. And there's kind of a brushy draw there. I had the wind in my favor. So I elected to give him a challenge bugle. Well, I did a location bugle, which is more of it's not a very aggressive bugle. If you've ever elk hunted, it's kind of just you hit a high and cut the note off, you know? And as soon as I did that, he just screamed back, and he was like under 100, you know, I mean, he just ripped back at me. And the last thing I wanted to do was get locked down. If he was coming in, I did not want to get locked down where I called from. So I quickly tried to drop back 30 yards or so in case he tried circling downwind of me. And as I was moving, I looked across the canyon, and he had already got up on his feet, and he was a mega giant. He, in my eyes, he's a 360 bull. He was a 7x8, just huge, all by himself, you know, had no interest in anything. I bugled at him one time. He bugled back and was leaving. Like, he wasn't spooked. He was just walking away. And so we let him go, and we felt like we knew where he was going that evening. We went in that evening, couldn't locate him, never heard him. And that was pretty much the end of I take that back. That evening, before I get ahead of myself, stalked in on another bull that was bugling. He was raking a tree and screaming his head off. And I dropped over the mountain and stalked in on him, and I come around the bush, and he was a really nice bull. He was probably 300 inch in that ballpark, 6x6, just a beautiful bull. Had one brow tine that kind of curved right straight down in front of his eye.
Gotcha.
And I stood there. When I came around the corner, at first I was like, oh, I'm killing him. And then I kind of put myself together and gained my composure. And I was like, not ready to kill him either. So I stood there and I filmed him on my phone for about 15 minutes, raking that tree and bugling and chuckling. And it's some pretty badass video. Then that was the end of that evening. Day 2, we were looking for that big bull. We seen him right after daylight. We got on him, and he was with 4 cows this day, and he was just screaming his head off. And he was on the opposite ridge from us, and they were heading towards this saddle. There was a couple other bulls in there, kind of bringing up satellite bulls, kind of bringing up the rear that he was kind of trying to keep back. And we tried to head him off and beat him to the saddle where they were going to top over the ridge. And right as we got down in the bottom, we heard 2 elk come together and just smash. And they were going at it. And they're probably 200 yards from us. Jordan, the guide, he actually filmed it from up above us. He was probably 400 yards behind us up on the ridge. And he actually filmed them kind of posturing to one another. They kept like bushes in between them, and they walked back and forth along these bushes. And then when they came back down, they came around the end of the bushes, and they didn't even hesitate. As soon as they came around the end of the bush, they just smashed together.
Man,
it was pretty awesome. And it ended up being the 6x6 that I had stalked in on the night before. And they fought for about 10 minutes. In hindsight, I could see their butts every once in a while as they were pushing. I should have just ran at them and shot them as they were preoccupied, because it was a knockout drag-out fight. They weren't just sparring.
Yeah, they weren't paying attention to anything else.
No, but my concern was the cows. He had 4 cows, and then one of the satellite bulls, when that happened, was trying to push the cows away from him, and they were directly in between the fighting bulls and us. And I was afraid if I ran out there, like the cows always do, they run back to the bull. Yeah. And the jig would have been up. So I elected not to do that, but I did beat him to the saddle. I had the cows coming right through to me, and that stupid little satellite bull dropped down low and pushed him up the ridge and they topped probably 80 yards from me. And the bull, when he stopped fighting, he come through and he started heading that way. And I tried to cut the distance as he was, coming quartering across the hill, but he topped the ridge just out of, well, actually the only tree. I had like an 80-yard lane I could have shot him, and he topped the hill just on the backside of the first bush that was possible.
Of course. So, why not?
Of course. Right. So that was the end of day 2. Isaiah came into camp that night. His wife, she had the baby induced on the 14th, and then the 15th, 16th, he stayed with her. And then the night of the 16th, he came in. 17th, he and I was our first day hunting together. We went out looking for that big bull again. Couldn't find him. We did get back on that 6x6 that I stalked in on and fought with the big bull. And he had 8 cows with him at this point. And he was quite the aggressive bull, and some satellites. And we stalked in on him, didn't know what they were. They were just talking a lot, and got in on him. And then we had a satellite bull come around a bush and bust us and started barking and went trotting off. And they didn't clear the county, but they just he pushed his cows up the ridge, and we weren't trying to kill him anyway. So we backed out. And while he was bugling and we were stalking in on him, every time he would bugle way off in the distance, you'd hear a bull bugle. And that bull would bugle, and this bull we were stalking would bugle back. But they were 3/4 of a mile apart. I mean, they were a long ways. And after that bull pushed up the ridge, we kind of sat there for a minute, and that bull bugled again. I said, "Hey, you want to go after him? We could do it." And he's like, "Well, it's getting kind of late in the morning. It's starting to get hot." He's like, "More than likely he's going to shut up." And, I'm not one to just give up. So I'm like, well, if he shuts up, he shuts up, but let's go give it a try. So we dropped down, we dropped some elevation, and he probably cut the distance in about half. And Isaiah did a bugle, and the bull answered back, and you could just barely hear him. So we knew he was over the next ridge. So we dropped down, went up the other hillside, got to the top of the ridge, eased across the ridge, and there was a big bowl there that was pretty thick with some juniper thicket, and just, looked like he was probably bedded in there, we assumed. And we were going to bugle at him to see where he was at. And Isaiah had to bugle about 4 inches from his lips, and you just hear it just did this deep groan in his bed, and they were like, "Oh crap, he is literally 100 yards right here on top of us." So we elected, we had no clue what he was. We just knew he was there. And we elected I was going to drop off the hillside a little bit. So typically the elk, when they're coming into you, they'll stay at the same elevation and wrap around the hillside. So I wanted to get the wind in my favor and slightly below his elevation where he's at now. So I dropped down the hill, Isaiah backed up, and he did 2 just little tiny cow calls. And I could barely hear him, and he was 50 yards from me. And that bull heard him from 100 yards away or more, and he just screamed. And the other ones are kind of half-hearted bugles, and this one, it was just guttural, squealing, just straight on, just awesome. And so within probably, 30 seconds of that, I started hearing some rocks rolling, and and you could hear him over there moving around on the hillside, and then I could see his feet. So the way the juniper are, you get about 3 feet from the ground level up about 3 feet is kind of fairly open. And when the elk are in there, you can see their feet a lot of times, but you can't see them. And that was exactly what was going on there. I'm looking across that bowl, and I could see his feet moving, and he was walking, and he was heading our way, and he hit 70 yards, and he started raking a tree, and I could see the tree top shaking, and had no clue what he was yet. And I'm sitting there, waiting on him, and Isaiah didn't call anymore, after those first 2 or 3 soft mews. And the bull front turns, starts coming my way. I can see his feet coming to me, so I kind of clip on just in case. And, it's 10:30 in the morning at this point, and sun's full sun's up, and his antlers came through an opening, and I saw his top on his right side, actually. And I saw a really good 5th and a really good 6th and a little 7th, and that sealed his fate. In my mind, this bull's going to die, And he's probably, at this point, 60 yards coming through the thicket. And as he's coming in, he kind of comes in right at about 40 yards. He comes out to where I can see him. It's really brushy, but I can full on see him. I get a great look. His rack is just shining in that sun. And I'm like, this is a good bull. So he's walking, kind of quartering to me at about 50. And there's one juniper tree that when he walks behind it, when he comes out the other side, I got a 15 to 20 yard wide open shooting lane out to 40 yards. So there's nowhere when he comes around that tree that he's not going to be in range, right? So I shoot the Garmin 0 sight, so I didn't care. I didn't have to range him yet. All I had to do is get the full draw when he comes out the other side, range him, shoot him, So that was my game plan. Well, I must have started drawing about a half a second too soon, because as he was walking behind that last juniper, I started drawing, and I'm in the shadows. I felt like I had pretty good cover. I started drawing, and at about half draw, he stops, takes a step backwards, and swings his big ass head around the side of the tree, and he's staring at me.
You.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
And now I'm at full draw, and luckily I hit record on my Tacticam. It's not great video because it focused on the deadfall in front of me, but you can see him come around, and you see his head kind of swing out the side of that tree, and he's just staring me down, and I'm at full draw, and his head's like in a, I don't know, volleyball size hole, just looking at me. And I'm like, okay, this isn't good. How long can I hold this? So it ended up at a minute 30, I decided I'm going to lower my cam and try to set my cam on my thigh. Right. And you see my arm come down, and the bull slowly drops out of camera sight. And for about 15 seconds, you're looking at grass. Well, the bull at this point is like, okay, something's not right here. I'm going to leave. So I could tell by his body posture he was going to turn. And I figured that hole that he was staring at me at was, volleyball size, basketball size. And when he turned, his vitals were going to be right in it. Right. So he started making that turn, and I brought my arm back up, and that shoulder opened up, and I just saw the money right there. And he saw me move on that last side, and he looks back at me, and I put that arrow right through that hole and hit him right behind the shoulder. Well, I didn't see where I hit him, but I heard it smacking, and he went whirling, running off back the way he came. He ran about 100 yards, and I heard him stop over there. It sounded like he was struggling, and I stood there for a second, and I walked over to Isaiah, and obviously he heard me shoot, and right about that time we heard, and that's a good sign when you hear that.
Oh, yeah.
So we gave him a little bit of time, and went down to where I thought he was standing, and I was about 10 yards north of where I thought he was, and to where he really was. It just, your mind in that excitement is things look different. And we found blood pretty quick within probably 15 yards of the impact of the arrow, and had enough blood. We started following it down, and we just started going, the direction we last heard him. And about the last spot we heard him, we come around this bush, and he was laying right there. So he went about 100 yards total. He ended up being a great 6x7 bull, just beautiful. He's on the wall there behind me. Here, I'm gonna flip a light on, and you can see him a little better.
There you go.
But he's just a beautiful bull. He's definitely not the 360 we were chasing, but he's well, he's into the 300s for sure. Just a beautiful bull. Great shape, nice heart shape to his rack, just everything about it. I mean, that's a 160-inch whitetail and a 145-inch whitetail beside him. So,
that gives you pretty good perspective.
Wow.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, he dwarfs everything in the house, so it's pretty awesome.
That's wild, man. So what was kind of like your thoughts once you had released the arrow? Like, you knew that you had hit him, you smoked him.
Well, I didn't see the arrow hit, and everything. I'm a pretty good shot, I would say, above average. And, it was pretty quick, and I heard the rib pop, mm-hmm. And when you hear that, there's a different sound between hitting gut and hitting shoulder and that chest thump. And I heard that chest thump, and that made me feel pretty confident. But they're big animals. You hear horror
mm-hmm.
stories of guys hitting them and never finding them, and so you're never too overconfident, or at least I'm never overconfident when I shoot one. But when I heard that cough, I felt really good about it, and it was it's pretty amazing. I'm not a religious person by any means, but like when you walk up on those animals, it's very, I mean, what's the word I want to look for? It's kind of grounds you, I guess. They're such amazing animals, and they give their life to let us go out there and chase them, and and nature's not easy. They're going to die one way or the other, but
right.
to give me a memory for the rest of my life. And, it's just, it's very, I don't know.
Like humbling.
Humbling. Yeah. I guess that's a good way of putting it. It's, very, very humbling. And it's awesome.
That's crazy, dude.
I would gladly never shoot another whitetail if I could bow hunt elk in New Mexico every year. Gladly.
I'm with you 100% on that statement. There's nothing like it.
I mean, maybe it's because I've been fortunate and killed a bunch of whitetails, but to me, being out in the mountains, one-on-one, pursuing the elk and just everything about it is just amazing. And I just love it. It's so rewarding, and I'm a loss for words, even just starting to think about it. It's like,
it really is hard to explain.
I don't have the words to describe how it makes you feel. Like that. Nothing I've ever hunted, and I've shot a bunch of species, or several species, I should say, the first elk I killed was just a raghorn. And that was for when I was filming for the television show. And that elk about had me in tears. Like when that elk topped over, like I was doing my damnedest to hold my composure together, because I knew I was on camera, and I couldn't form sentences. Like your eyes are welling up, and even, 3 elk later, when you walk up on them, you get this like lump in your throat, and you're incredibly thankful, that animal, gave his life for you. It's just, they're amazing.
That's awesome, man. Really appreciate you sharing that tale. You don't hear a lot about the elk stories and what everyone goes through out west. And you got really the full taste of every aspect of the hunt. You got to see a little bit of everything, experience a little bit of everything, and you got it done. And a lot of people that hunt elk don't get to experience that. It's drag, and then you hope for that one good opportunity. And you really got to just
100%.
take it all in.
And I think that's another reason why I love being able to go to New Mexico, because sure, over-the-counter sounds great, but everybody I know that goes to over-the-counter, I won't say everybody, 95% of everybody that goes to over-the-counter come back with horror stories of how the unit's overrun with people, and they hunted for 10 days and heard one bugle, but it may have been a hunter. It's that sort of thing. And, when I've hunted New Mexico, you see hunters, but very, very few, because it's limited entry. So the units aren't overrun. And I feel like you can get away from them. If you pack in far enough, you do get away from them. Whereas I think the over-the-counter guys have that mentality. I got to go in deep. So everybody now goes in deep, and it's just overrun with people. Whereas in New Mexico, you don't have to go in deep. But if you do, you get away from everybody. Right. And, my buddy Dave, the bull he killed, it was a rough pack out for us, because it was the last day. Our guide, or his guide, had to go. He worked for the state of New Mexico. He had to go back to work the next day. And we didn't recover until the next morning. We just weren't confident on the shot. And so we backed out. It was supposed to be cool. So he and I and the cook went in, old Johnny Smith, and we found the bull. He only went another 120 yards from where we left off, and we quartered him up. And I mean, it was an all-day pack out. We started packing meat at a.m., and we didn't finish till 7 o'clock that night. It was 2 miles in to tracking, 2 miles out carrying 90 pounds of meat, 2 miles in, 2 miles out carrying meat. So, I mean, it was just it's a 16-mile day packing meat. That takes a toll on your body, and you carry it and you drop that pack off at camp, and that feeling you get when you take roller skates off, where you're kind of equilibrium scooping. Yeah. It was that way. Dropping that pack off my back, I kept feeling like I was falling forward.
Yep.
Like my whole body, I just had this like feeling that I was falling forward, because I took that pack off and had it on so long. But so we got the full taste of it. Mine was we got lucky, and he died close to private ranch, actually like 50 yards from the private ranch property line. But it was just a thin, narrow strip, and he could take. He had the cook at camp there. He drove an hour and 40 minutes all the way around, and came in the backside to that private property on National Forest there, where you can get an ATV, and we only had to go around the private, and we were back to the ATV in a short ways. It was still a long ride out of there, but it sure beat.
It's a lot better than packing them.
Better than packing it.
For sure.
Yeah. So.
Wow, outstanding. Damian, thank you for joining us. It's been a really good show, and hope everybody enjoyed that tale.
Always fun.
As always.
You bet. And we'll just kind of leave it off there. Thanks for listening, and you guys enjoy, and stay tuned for the next tales.